It's nice to see everyone, familiar faces, familiar names. Some people are in the back row that I know. Yes, see you smiling. I'm Jamie McKee. I am privileged and honored to be here with JD today. JD and I have known each other on LinkedIn for a while, but we didn't actually meet until recently, within the last 6 months. And the more I dig into his past, the more information I get. So my background, at first logistics, if there's any questions as we go along, please save them till the end. The format's going to be kind of Q&A on our side. We've met for breakfast every now and again, and so I'm going to kind of invite you into our breakfast conversation, and so you kind of get to see what that flow is like. And then I'm going to do a little bit of fun at the end, do some rapid fire lightning questions at the end that are totally unrelated to what we're talking about today, and just for a little bit of fun, and then we'll open it up to the floor to you guys. So any questions you have, please write them down, memorize them, throw them out to us, and I'll let JD can answer them. So Jamie McKee, I am here as a friend, but I'm also here professionally. I've known Neil as well over the years. My background is operations logistics side of things, international business as well. I'm originally from Scotland, from Edinburgh. Came over in 2000. Was a professional rugby player back in the day. Hung up my boots a while ago, thankfully. Did break some bones, yes. But in recent years, I've done 2 healthcare IT startups in Columbus. And then the most recent one was a company called Storm Impact. It's a machine learning AI platform, B2B SaaS. And after 2.5 years of business looking at weather and how that impacts surface assets, we actually got acquired in April of 2025. So just shortly a 3-year, within the last year. So it's been a fun journey. It's been fast. I got a lot learned from that. Most of it is to do with talking to VCs and fundraising and everything like that, which is how we kind of have a conversation here. So, but with that, I'll kind of hand it over to you. You can tee it up, and then I'll kind of intro you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, number one, thank you everyone for being here. It's a real privilege. There's a lot of sponsors and a lot of friends. I have a friend from high school in the back, so this is a real blessing to have everybody here. And really the main reason that we're here is what Neil has been doing such a great job of for 10 years, is to build community. When I was in California, there were about 4,000 venture deals a year, and so being immersed in that level of ecosystem, and I know there's some other boomerangers in the room as well, the community is very different. It's much more connected, and that's what we've been trying to accomplish with everything that I've been working on since I came back to Ohio. And I think Neil has done a phenomenal job. It's impressive, and hats off to everyone in the room for being able to do 30 seconds and get everyone around the room, because getting to know people who we don't normally interact with is a big part of creating that connective tissue in the community that will allow us to attract more capital and more talent, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. So, in teeing everything up today, because I know it says 15 minutes, but that's going to fly by, so I'm going to try and get through these questions as much as I can. So we have quite a list, but looking through JD's resume, it's pretty extensive, so just to kind of give you a little bit of background on him, and I've made some notes because I've had to capture notes over the period of time. He has been a CEO, COO, CFO. He's been on 8 startups. He's done over $1 billion in deals. He's mentored hundreds of startups. He's also a former Marine and raised over $100 million. So he has this depth of knowledge that I think we can all learn from and take nuggets from. And I've been on your side of the fence. I've been a spectator, and now I'm on this side. It's kind of weird, but on your side, you only gather so much data. So hopefully there's some nuggets here that you guys can take away and we can talk about and all that kind of good stuff that you can learn from both of us. I'm planning on staying afterwards. I'm sure JD is afterwards, so you guys can come up and chat with us casually as well. But question number one, and kind of teeing it up for there's 3 sections that we're going to cover today. One of them is kind of what is the Midwest and the ingredients that are involved in that. Also, why is the Midwest kind of called this flyover state, in that area? And then also we want to kind of moving forward, looking into the future, what does it mean to be a storyteller with your business and anything else that you are? I've kind of experienced all of that in my personal journey, but you have a lot more depth in it. So question number one for you is you spent 28 years building companies in California. What originally took you out there?
Sure, thanks Jamie. So what originally took me to California was that's where all the jobs and that's where all the money was. I was privileged to go through the honors accounting program at Ohio State, and it was pretty much of an on-ramp to public accounting. I got offers in Southern California from all 8 of the big 8 accounting firms, passed the CPA exam, and had the privilege of auditing both public and private companies. And I originally moved to San Diego in 1991, but it didn't take too long as in late 1995 I moved up to San Francisco as well, because Netscape went public in August of 1995. And I knew the world had changed. That was the first browser company ever. Mark Andreessen moved from the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana out to Silicon Valley, and Jim Clark and Jim Barksdale and Mark Andreessen took the first ever browser company public in August of 1995. I knew that the world had changed and that San Francisco was now the center of the universe for all things technology and finance, and I absolutely had to be there. And so I called some friends of mine that I had worked with at KPMG that had moved up to Stanford to get their MBAs, and I said, hey, I want to be a CFO for an internet startup company and help them raise money because I'm a CPA and an auditor dude and I can do all of that. And they said, geez, fly up here next week, we'll get you 10 interviews. And that was the start of a very amazing journey of 28 years in California.
Yeah, I just can't imagine what it'd be like to be right at the beginning of everything. What kind of companies, what stages were they at when you were there, when you actually got yourself involved into that area?
Sure. So it's a lot of information, so I actually made a little walkthrough here. So when I was at KPMG on the left-hand side, I audited both public and private companies. Jack in the Box Foods was one of them, IDEC Pharmaceuticals, Strategene, Ventura Software, Bluebird Software, a whole bunch of other ones. If you've ever heard of IDEC Pharmaceuticals, when I was auditing Strategene, IDEC Pharmaceuticals was a 4-person company in the basement of Strategene. IDEC Pharmaceuticals eventually went public and got acquired for $6.8 billion by Biogen. So it's now Biogen IDEC. Ed Rodriguez, who was the chief financial officer, the first chief financial officer at IDEC Pharmaceuticals, was the guy that recruited me at KPMG to move from Ohio out there to take that job. I caught the bug of venture capital very early in my career, and I knew I had to have more of it, because once you get the bug, you either have it or you don't. And once Hugh is sitting here laughing. Once you have the bug to do that kind of startup work, you just can't shake it. It's one of those things that becomes in your blood. So the next one over, DH Technology. This was a client of mine when I was at KPMG, Pete Marwick. They were backed by TA Associates. They did a successful IPO, and they hired me away from KPMG. This was my first job out of public accounting. They said, hey, we want you to come to our company. We're going to take the money that we used from the proceeds of the IPO and go buy companies. So we want you to come buy companies with our money. And I said, that sounds like a great job. So I've been a deal junkie ever since. That company eventually, DH, we did some acquisitions there. I ran M&A for a newly public company. Eventually, DH Technology, as it would have it, got acquired by Axiom as well for $175 million. The next step was my leap up to San Francisco, where I joined Organic Online in the center. Organic Online was actually a spin-out of Wired magazine, actually a spin-out of Wired magazine. Matthew Nelson was the chief operating officer at Organic, and we spun him out. We built some of the first ever websites for Nike, McDonald's, Levi's. If you remember in 1996, the Lucasfilm re-released the trilogy of Star Wars films. We built the first ever website for that, and it melted servers in the back. We're not really going to promote it that much, but it was the internet in 1996. Nike was one of our clients at Organic. If you remember, in 1996, the Summer Olympics were in Atlanta. And it used to be that Nike would hire a small army of photographers and writers, and then they would write press stories and photographs, and they would send out 1,200 FedEx boxes to all of the local news agencies, newspapers, magazines, TV stations, radio stations, because they wanted Nike-sponsored athletes to get coverage. So we said, hey, we got this really cool idea. How about we put it in the cloud. The cloud didn't exist in 1996. So we literally had a team of 6 people on the ground that took those news stories and photographs, and we sent out 1,200 passwords instead of 1,200 FedEx boxes. And Nike paid us $1 million in the summer of 1996 to do that. The next step was that the engineers came to me and said, hey, we've come up with this really cool software that we can show our clients the click streams through the websites. So web analytics was born. We were one of the first companies. Now, what I said was, well, Organic is a professional services firm, and Accrue is a software company. They're 2 completely different business models. So we did a tax-free spin-out of Accrue software. And you see that Moore Davidow, I led that through 3 rounds of venture capital with Moore Davidow in both Organic and Accrue, ended up doing IPOs in early 2000. I was the first chief financial officer at Accrue. I was the VP Finance and Operations, employee number 31 at Organic, and employee number 2 at Accrue Software. Then I did a contract CFO work with Adjacency. That was a company, it was another web development shop that was working with Patagonia, Caterpillar, and some of the big companies. We sold that one for 10 times revenue to Sapient, and then Sapient eventually sold it to Publicis Group as well. Then I started my own company, Deal Management Systems, and we took that same concept that we did for Nike, and I applied it to my world, because my world had been elbow deep in 15 boxes of documents in a due diligence data room. And it always had 12 boxes, and you had to make copies of it and send it to the lawyers in New York and the lawyers in Los Angeles and the board members over there. And I said, well, gosh, we sent 1,200 passwords for Nike. Why can't we send 35 passwords to a data room full of the due diligence data rooms? So I founded and was employee number 1 of Deal Management Systems. We were one of the first online deal room companies in the world. Intralinks was one of our competitors. We processed over $1 billion in deals for wireless facilities. WebSense, we took them public. Michelle probably remembers WebSense, a San Diego company. Shell Oil, we did $750 million worth of deals for them. We raised $2.5 million of venture capital. We closed over $1 billion in deals, and eventually Merrill Corporation licensed the technology. Then I went in to become Chief Financial Officer of vMix Media. I was employee number 4. Over the course of years, we raised $31 million from JK&B Capital, Enterprise Partners, Mission Partners, and ATA Ventures. I was the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer. Chromatin, I was the contract Chief Financial Officer for that company in Chicago. I commuted from San Diego to Chicago half-time. They raised money from GE Capital, BP Ventures, Unilever, and Beryl. I also then, this is the last one, I'll land the plane on this. SG Biofuels, I served as the Chief Financial Officer, employee number 3. We raised money from Life Technologies, which was later acquired by Thermo Fisher for $16.9 billion. Koch Industries, which is they had a $35 billion refining company that invested in our company. Finisterre Ventures, and one of the large private equity venture capital firms in the world, Thomas McInerney and Partners. All in on SG Biofuels, we raised $37 million as the Chief Financial Officer for that company. That's all the companies that I worked on officially, and then I've also consulted with many more since then. So that's just sort of a flavor of some of the companies that I've had the privilege of working with, and I honestly, it has been a privilege to be able to connect with and work with some of the investors and the executives and the board members of all of these companies. If I could tell you stories all afternoon long about board meetings and the things that went well and the things that didn't. But I'm hoping that today we'll give you a window into pieces of that will be helpful for you as you grow your companies.
Yeah, you can take your breath now.
Thank you.
That was pretty impressive. There will be a written test after this, so I hope everyone's taking notes. So with all this momentum that was happening in California and Chicago and everywhere else in between, what made you come back to the Midwest? Especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, with all of that money just flying around and all these positions that you were in, and because you are from the Midwest and then you left, and now what would be, I'm curious to understand kind of the thought process behind being in California, being on that high, and then coming back to the Midwest. It'd be interesting to hear what you have to share there.
Yeah, when you live in California for 28 years and you move back to Ohio, you get that question a lot, like, why?
Yeah.
And for many, I see many familiar faces in the room as well that have had a boomerang experience where you grow up in the Midwest and you go to the coast because that's where the money and the jobs are, and you eventually come back. And the reason for me was the reason for many people in this room is for family. In my case, my mom had a massive heart attack and came back to help with that for a while, and I was coming back and forth, and then I came back to stay, and it was funny. Then COVID happened, and it just turned out that I was supposed to be here. You know, it's like God always has a plan for us, right? Mm-hmm. God apparently wanted me and Mom to go through COVID together, and I'm glad that she didn't have to do that here, and I didn't have to do that there. And so after I hung around here for a while, I decided to stay. It was really interesting. In the fall of 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, there was Columbus Startup Week, and there was a speaker there and I decided to go to the event just to see what was going on, because I was like, I don't know if I can even have a venture career in Ohio. Are there enough deals? I didn't know, and I decided that I was going to go to this event, and the lead-off speaker was the CEO of Upstart, which is headquartered in San Francisco and backed by Google Ventures and some of the big firms out there. I'm like, why is this guy the speaker in Columbus, Ohio? And I found out that it's because they set up their first office outside of Silicon Valley right here in Columbus, Ohio. And I asked him why. He said because of all the data analytics interns that are coming out of Ohio State and all the other universities around here. And I'm like, okay, well, there is some there. And so I'm excited to say that there is a lot of opportunity here in this region.
So when you first came back and you were first kind of immersed yourself into this ecosystem, what were the positive stuff that you were seeing? What were the negative implications that you were seeing from now your history, and
Sure.
Now you're kind of into this slower life, if you will?
Sure. So I'm a deal guy from the word go, and I'm a data guy from the word go. So I'm like, okay, well, nobody believes that there's any good deals in Ohio. Let's just go look. And so I started going out on some of the subscription services that I've looked at and subscribed to for years, PitchBook and Crunchbase and CB Insights. And I started just, okay, how many deals were there last year? And there's a couple hundred deals, but I started looking through and seeing what the companies were. I started seeing who the investors were. And what I was really surprised about is that there are a lot of coastal investors that are putting money to work here in Ohio, and there are not a lot of people that know about it. For example, there's a Coastal Ventures. Anybody that's been on the coast in the room knows that Coastal Ventures is one of probably the top 5 in the world, and they just invested in a Cleveland company called Sonic Fire Technology, and they literally put out fires with acoustic wave technology at a NASA Glenn Research Center using no water and no chemicals. They point this acoustic wave at it, and it disrupts the oxygen molecules to put out the fire. And again, people don't know about these stories, and that's the one thing I know we're going to talk about today, is that the ability to raise all of this money for each of these companies had more to do with effective storytelling of how we're going to build this up to a $50 to $100 million company that it did with anything else. It's not about a slick pitch. It's not about a hype. It's not about the best pitch. It's about effective storytelling, and that's a big part of what I've learned along the way.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. I know in our conversations at breakfast and other meetings, you've also mentioned to me that there's also 5 to 10 times the amount more venture and innovation capital that can be made here. What kind of points you in that direction? What are the keys and the clues that you're looking for there?
So number one, we have a lot of great talent here. There's a lot of really smart people, but we also have a lot of great universities where there's a lot of research money flowing through. One of the things about both the Silicon Valley area and Southern California, there's a high concentration of PhDs that could come up with patentable technology. And that's one of the, really the sort of the holy grail. Stanford and Berkeley and many other universities have done extremely well for their foundations to actually make money on commercializing products. I think the fact that we have billions of dollars of research money flowing just through Ohio, let alone the whole region, and we're spitting out only about 250 to 300 companies a year, I think there's a lot of upside potential for us to do a lot more. And the primary reason that we're not doing more is because most people don't know about these stories.
Yeah, and do you think that's why people are underestimating what's happening in the Midwest right now? it's kind of a sleeping giant at this point?
Absolutely. I hate to admit it, because I grew up here, but I too was guilty of believing that, this was flyover country when it came to venture capital. That for most people's opinion, that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Why would we look at deals in Ohio when I got 50, 100 of them on my desk that I can drive to in a couple of hours? That was really the thinking in early Silicon Valley days. One thing I've observed, and a lot of you in this room have observed, is that in the last 10 years, capital is now portable. In fact, the Angel Capital Association recently put out a study that said even in the angel levels, 40% of the money is going outside the region because it's all about good deal flow and it matters a lot less where it is.
Yeah. So I have a two-part question here, and I have to read these both out just because I'll forget them otherwise. How do venture deals actually get discovered in places like California? Part A. And then what breaks down in that discovery process when it comes to the Midwest companies?
If you ask any investor in California, they'll tell you I get all my deals through trusted networks. They almost never do a deal that comes in cold. And in fact, I mean this as a point of information and not to offend anybody, but when an investor gets a pitch deck and it comes in cold, many of those investors will tell you, wow, this entrepreneur isn't even creative enough to find a way to get a warm introduction to me. And if that's how they approach getting introductions to high-profile people, how are they going to approach getting introductions to customers? So it's almost a gating factor to find at least a lawyer or an accountant or an HR person that has worked with those investors before. Do a little bit of homework, be strategic about how you approach important relationships, and that'll put you on the top of the pile in a heartbeat.
And just to kind of double click on that, kind of going off script a little bit, that's been my experience as well, is if you can get that warm intro, that is huge. And it's also, once you get that intro, is being able to follow through on that.
Right.
There's been plenty of entrepreneurs that I've met in my travels that have said, I got this introduction, but I never followed up. And I'm like, well, why are we sitting here talking about how you're struggling? Maybe go ahead and make that introduction. So my advice to you, whoever's out there starting their own company, is, excuse the term, you got to be ballsy. You got to be really confident, even though you're not, or you may think you're not. You got to be really confident. Just go out, and because at the end of the day, I've met people. To your point, is like, why didn't they introduce themselves? I'm just a human as well. When you start talking to people, they're actually just normal people that just want to get the deal, or they want to strike a deal, or have a negotiation, or have a chat with you. So just a little footnote there. So thank you for that.
I think that's an important point because it reflects a little bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen in order for us to capture our full potential. Ohio used to be very, very innovative. I mean, we got the Wright brothers, we're aviation, the tire companies, Detroit had a big ripple effect. So my dad actually worked at a company called Ohio Semiconductor way back in the day. One of his internship projects as an electrical engineer out of Purdue was to replace the old tube radios in cars and create a transistor radio for the cars, right? We used to be very innovative, but in the last 20 or 30 years, we've somehow gotten into more of a harvest mentality, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is other regions and other industries surge ahead, and we get left behind. And in fact, one of the things I can show you real quick is that the amount of venture capital that we're pulling down as a state relative to what we could be pulling down is about 2%. And I think that's a reflection of that we got out of that harvest mentality, and that we need to be more innovative. We need to embrace failure. We need to embrace connectivity, and be willing to take more shots on goal. Yeah. That experimentation mentality is important.
Kind of leads to that question, is like, what happens when great companies just stay invisible? Do they elect to do that, or is that just a fear factor, or what's your experience with that?
That's a great question. No startup should stay invisible for very long. There's a time and a place to be stealth, but you're not just building a company and building a team and building a group of customers. You're literally creating a movement. And if you're not doing that, you're probably not going to be successful in getting it to a $50 to $100 million company. And at the end of the day, that is the goal. You know, Chromatin is a great example, and several of the other scientific and medical companies, they're very well known in the medical community and the scientific community. They do a good job of building their brand. Why did that just advance all by itself? But they don't do a good job of getting the word out in the financial community. And that's equally important, to be known in the financial community, to be the deal that everybody wants to get. That's one thing that a lot of people here don't know how to do, is to shop for capital. That you have to become the thought leader in your industry, and if you get customer growth and traction, the investors will actually come to you.
I've definitely seen that from my side. So that's kind of a nice segue into the storytelling portion of it.
Right.
You've talked about storytelling, and not as marketing as such, but as a strategy. What do you mean by that? And that was a conversation between you and I.
Yeah.
Use storytelling as a strategy rather than using raw marketing.
Sure.
Maybe expand on that.
So you really have to get inside. If you want to raise money from an investor, you have to paint a picture where they're going to see success the same way you do. Lou Holtz, and to use a sports analogy, if you can't see the shot, you can't make the shot, right? The investor is sitting there listening to your pitch about your technology and your customers and all that kind of stuff, but what they really want to know is, how am I going to get a return on my investment? If I write $1 million check to this entrepreneur, how am I going to get 10 million back, right? How much capital are we going to need over the next 5 or 6 years versus how much capital does the entrepreneur need right now? And if you are unable to say, hey, here's 5 other companies that were successfully acquired for the number that we need in order for you to get a 10x on your investment, if you can't point to other companies or paint the picture where they can see this company being acquired or going public, you're probably not going to get the money. So effective storytelling is not just about telling your story. It's about understanding how the pieces of your story fit in with the pieces of the investor's story, because everybody has a boss. VCs have limited partners, and they expect a return on their money. They know the risk profile, that a certain percentage of those companies are not going to be successful, but what the limited partners are counting on is that 1 or 2 of them are going to pay for all of the losers. So the entire time, the VC is looking at your pitch, your emails, listening to your pitch deck, listening to your monthly updates and so forth. They're all looking for that signal of, when is this thing going to take off in revenue, and how can we get on the right path?
And from your experience inside those funds, who are the people that should be hearing these messages and these stories from the founders? And on the reverse side, how do the founders go out and try and find what that mission is or the purpose of that venture fund, and to kind of give them some data to then work forward with, to then prepare, for that conversation. So maybe expand on that a little bit as well.
Sure. The number one thing is to do your homework about the investor. You should not only know which venture firm would be a good fit for your deal at your stage in your industry, but you should also know which specific partner at that firm. You should also go professionally stalk them. What I mean by that, I was in the Marine Corps, right? So everything is strategic, right? You got to do your homework ahead of time. So I'll share an example. So Josh Green at Moore Davidal. The clean tech practice at Moore Davidal had 6 partners, and if the 6 of them had a unanimous vote, then it went to the general partnership, and if you had all 6, then the general partner is going to pretty much bless it. And I went out and I found everything that Josh Green had published. I went on SlideShare, I looked at all of the decks and every presentation that he'd ever made. I started following on Medium at the time, Substack's the thing now, everything that they post on LinkedIn. Understand their thought leadership and how your thought leadership might fit or not fit with what they're thinking. I did this for a long time, and then I'd end up going to one of those conferences, and in between the sessions that the person just came off of the panel, we're over there talking with coffee, and this guy, oh, I'm the general partner from Sierra Ventures. Oh yeah, I thought your question was really insightful, right? So you create those accidental collisions by doing your homework ahead of time and knowing how your product and your startup fits into the whole value chain of that industry, and how you're going to get it to 100 million in revenues and either get acquired or go public.
And I think also that's where LinkedIn comes in as well. If you look for that person and see who's connected to them and who you're connected to. I think that goes back to the beginning of our conversation is who gets the warm intro. I think that gives it a factor of success, definitely with there. Speaking of success, when it comes to storytelling, how from your days in California and also now your days in Ohio, how do you measure storytelling, effective storytelling?
Well, the first thing is, did you get a second meeting from the investor? That'll tell you if you have effective storytelling. The second thing is, I've done so many of these pitches up and down Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, and I learned over time that we would walk out of the meeting and the CEO would ask me, how do you think it went? And I figured out pretty quickly that you figure out what percentage of the time did the entrepreneur talk about product feature, product feature, product feature, and what percentage of the time did the entrepreneur talk about customer, customer, customer. That's one of the biggest signals that I look for from an investor or a board member is, are we hitting the target? And the second piece is, did the investor ask a lot of questions? Did they stop you on slide 3 and ask you to drill in a little bit deeper? I think that those are some subtle ways to tell. And then it's also important to tell your story online and in email updates. One of the most important things if you're fundraising is you have a cadence where every month all your prospective investors will get an email from you that says, here's the update on sales, here's the update on team, here's the update on fundraising, and here's the key introductions, our strategic asks that we're looking for. If you set that cadence, even if you haven't gotten a meeting, you eventually will. I'll give you a great example at SG Biofuels. We were trying to get Finished Year Ventures to invest in our deal, and our CEO was pinging Ara Kukatai for 11 months, and he sent him those monthly updates, and he never once responded. And eventually one day, and he picked up the phone and he called and he said, we're ready to take a meeting now, and in 2 weeks we had a term sheet. Because he had been at those same conferences, and he knew who we were. Our CEO was a thought leader in the industry. He was out pressing the flesh with all the right people. And I think that kind of gets back to the answer to your question, who in the VC firm is the one you want to connect with? After you've done your homework on which partner matters, always get a warm introduction to them.
Yeah, for sure. So just dovetailing really quickly to the side here, there's a question here that we wrote down. If the Midwest wants to truly capitalize on this opportunity, what we're doing right now, as an ecosystem, as a community, as a state, what mindset shifts matter most? And that, I guess that would be a question that you can hopefully answer, entrepreneur, business owner, and then also the VC. Like maybe all three, maybe you just pick one of those. How does that mindset have to shift?
The mindset shift is that we need to embrace experimentation and failure. What's really interesting is that we should kind of know that, because with all the billions of dollars of federal research money flowing through the state, what's the scientific method? Hypothesis, test, iterate. Well, it's the same thing we do with startups. I have a hypothesis that I can sell 1 million units of this product for $2 a piece. We're going to test that thesis. How many customers? How many email? How are we going to reach them? How much does it cost us, right? And then we're going to iterate, because everybody in this room knows that your first plan never works. You're going to iterate a lot. People talk about pivots, right? Well, that's just a fancy way of applying the scientific method. We're simply iterating. We're pivoting. We're trying to find out what happens. Tim Schigel at Refinery Ventures down in Cincinnati, he talks about he talks about the need to pivot, but he says what you're really looking for is lightning in a bottle. In fact, if you see on the board out there, I don't really talk that much about the Smart Money Ventures podcast, but there's 8 episodes from Ohio people out there, including Tim Schigel. And that's one of the things that he talked about, because you may not know this, but Tim Schigel, not only is he the founder of Centrifuge and Refinery Ventures, but he was the founder of the company called Share This. You know that little triangle thing that you click on and it either shares to an email or this or that or the other thing? Tim Schigel at Refinery Ventures in Cincinnati invented that. And they push over 1 billion units of content every day, or some number like that. And he said, the number of times that they had to iterate to figure that out. You're just trying to find your lightning in a bottle where the customer traction is going to take off faster than you need to spend money to drive it.
Okay. So what does we've this momentum and we're competing in the world market, domestic market, as either a funds base or as a community of entrepreneurs. What is winning as a region, as we put it here, winning as a region, what does that look like? Now, because you come from the epicenter, the West Coast, come to the Midwest, you know what winning looks like. So what does it look like for here in the Midwest?
I think that winning as a region would look a lot like it does in California. What I mean by that is there is a fluidity of capital and talent between San Diego and Orange County and Los Angeles and Santa Barbara and San Francisco and the South Bay and the East Bay and the city and Vegas and all of that. You can hop on a plane and be in any of those business centers in less than an hour. You can fly to Utah and go skiing. What I would like to see in this region is a fluidity of capital and talent between Chicago and Ann Arbor and Cleveland and Cincinnati and Columbus and Nashville, where a medtech executive can work in any one of those cities and do sales and customer support in any one of those cities. And if my spouse wants to move to this city that's a 4-hour drive away, it's not a problem because there's 10 startup companies in that industry that I can go work at as well. When we get that kind of critical mass, then things begin to flow naturally. And the connective tissue of what Neil is doing here, what we're doing at the Ohio Venture Pipeline, and all of the other programs, we have great programs here. The more of that connective tissue that we can build, the easier things flow. Because in the same way that capital comes through trusted sources, so does talent. Hey, I went to work at this company and you should come too. That's what I think, I believe that's what winning as a region really looks like. Because if Westerville gets a deal and Dublin doesn't, does either one really lose? They're both winning. We win as a region.
Yeah. And especially with all the educational institutions that we have that are just
Exactly.
spewing at students, that we should be able to capitalize on that. So one final question, and before we go into the lightning round, which I'm excited about. For people in the room who are here listening and being attentive, founders, operators, supporters, there's even some fun people in here, some investors. What's one thing they can do differently starting now, and now being the beginning of 2026, and also the beginning of this week, and maybe a different strategy that they're putting forward for the rest of the year? So hand it over to you.
Two things. Continue to suit up and show up to events like this and the Ohio Venture Pipeline on April 9th. Shameless plug on the board out there. There is a QR code at the top where it says Ohio Venture Pipeline. You can buy early bird tickets starting today. And the second thing is there's also an opportunity where you can download all the deal lists. For example, last year in the state of Ohio, there were 295 startup companies that raised $1.3 billion. And we have a breakdown of all of those lists, and you can download them from the Ohio Venture Pipeline website. The call to action is go through there and find 2 or 3 of those companies that you can meaningfully help with some introductions to either customers, investors, or the ones that have raised money. They're all out recruiting right now, and they need connected to the talent that they can hire. And whether that's here in Ohio or someplace else, they all need help doing that. The second thing is give all of the Venture Pipeline All-Stars as much free PR on LinkedIn as you possibly can. We have 2 examples up here. So tombstones. If you're in the deal business, you know what a tombstone is. If you're not, a tombstone in a cemetery memorializes someone's life. A tombstone in the deal world memorializes the fact that we actually got the deal done and the wire transfer came in, and that's means to celebrate. And so in the deal world, when you complete one of those deals and you're on the management team or the board, they'll take you to a really nice steak dinner and give you a lucite cube for your working 120 hours a week, and this is common in the deal world. But nobody does that for a $3 million seed round that happens in Ohio. But DOSI Simulations is one of our all-stars, and we do these tombs. We have 42 of these. We have 54 all-stars that we've named over the years. And all it does is it shows that, for example, DOSI Simulations in April last year, $5.4 million seed financing. But I call this one the triple crown of venture funding, the triple crown of growth in a life science company, because not only did they raise seed money, they got their FDA 510K approval, and they got their CMS hospital billing code. Now, if you know anything about this company, they recently did a deal with Cleveland Clinic. They recently did a deal with the Mayo Clinic, and they have over 30 hospital systems now that are signed on as customers buying their systems. All of these companies need this free PR. So when you see us post this on LinkedIn, please like it, share it, say congratulations to the team. If you know the investors, give them a digital high five on LinkedIn. Free PR on LinkedIn is probably one of the most powerful ways that everybody in this room can help out in terms of the fluidity of information and the fluidity of capital and talent.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure the marketers in the room are nodding their heads with that. All right, thank you for that. Appreciate that. So because of time, we're going to go through the quick fire rounds just so you can, now you know JD as a professional. Let's see if we can get to know him as a non-professional, as a personal person. All right, so I've got 6 questions. We're going to fire it at him. He's going to answer the questions, and then once we're done with that, we'll open up the questions to the floor, and you guys can fire away. And okay, question number 1, ready?
Ready.
All right. What were your least favorite school subjects?
Algebra. Fascinating, because here I passed the CPA and I'm the billion-dollar deal guy. But in whatever grade it was, I looked at the grade card like 6 months ago or whatever. I failed algebra in like 8th grade or something like that. I think Brian was there. But apparently it worked out okay.
Yeah, very good. All right. By the way, I don't know the answers to these questions, so this is new for me as well.
I kept them myself.
Yes, you did. All right. What's a small decision you made that ended up having a big impact on your life?
Joining the Marine Corps. Hands down. In fact, I don't tell a lot of people this, but I started at Ohio State, and in my first quarter, I had a 1.6 GPA, and I was on academic probation. My dad had left when I was 13, and I was a little bit of a lost ball in high weeds for a while. But that was the impetus that caused me to join the Marine Corps, because I needed college money, and quite honestly, I needed a male role model. And 13 weeks with a drill instructor with his boot where it needed to be at Parris Island, South Carolina, was just the recipe. It was the best thing I ever did in my life.
And we're the better for it.
I'm the better for it.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Do you prefer summer or the winter?
I definitely prefer summer. I'm a sunshine guy from the word go, and one of the hobbies that I used to do in San Diego was race sailboats competitively. We came in 3rd place in the Beneteau Cup in 2014 in San Diego on the on Adeline, which is a Beneteau 367, a crew of 8 people, and it's a ton of fun. I really enjoy, because if you think about it, building a startup company is having about 50 different levers that you can move around for that hypothesis test iterate thing. And a sailboat is the same thing. There's 50 things that you can adjust to make that boat go just a little bit more faster without an engine and against other people that are on a similar, we do one design races, so everybody has the same type of boat. It's cool.
In summertime in Ohio, what do you do?
Well, very small boats over on Hoover Dam.
Roger that. All right. Which musicians or bands have you most enjoyed seeing perform live?
So my favorite concert ever, who likes the Eagles? So remember, they broke up, and then after 14 years, they got back together. In 1994, at Irvine Meadows Amphitheater, outdoors in Orange County, California, they did the, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
Oh my gosh, I was there too. The Hell Freezes Over tour at Irvine Meadows for the Eagles. That was after 14 years. That was great.
That's pretty cool. What would you say is the best meal you've ever had?
So one of the things that you get to do in California as well is go deep sea fishing. And I used to go once or twice a year. And this one trip, you'd leave at like 8 o'clock at night, you go down below and sleep, and you wake up at like 5 a.m. and you're down off the coast of Ensenada, and they have these big fish pens out there where they're growing fish out there in these big giant nets. And so that attracts a whole bunch of sort of other activity around it. And so we were waiting for the sun to come up, and we dropped our lines in the water, and by 8:30 we had 15 bluefin tuna in the boat.
Gosh.
Now, if anybody likes sushi in the room, bluefin tuna is awesome. And so the best meal I ever had was fresh bluefin tuna on the way back to San Diego from that trip in Ensenada, Mexico.
Interesting. That's fun. All right, last question, then we'll hand it over. What activities have gained new meaning or importance for you as you've gotten older?
So a couple of things. I think the first thing is mentoring young entrepreneurs and students as well.
Yeah.
I think in this year we're probably going to see some more stuff that we're planning to do with college students in particular. But there's nothing more rewarding. The most rewarding phase of my career has been mentoring younger entrepreneurs, because to help them avoid the same mistakes that we've all made. I mean, the failure rate of those 4,000 companies a year in California is 75%. So you learn as much from your mistakes as you do from your successes. But being able to pass that along and to see other people like Dossi Simulations become successful and know that we were one small part of being their cheering section along the way is extremely rewarding. And then the second thing is that I can't push myself as hard as I used to. I'm still a hard charger. I still, go big or go home. But at the same time, I've learned to pace myself perhaps a little bit better since I moved back to Ohio. And I think the pace of life here has really helped out a lot with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Jimmy.
it. I will pick up the tab for this breakfast.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.